minutes, a few seconds before it goes live. Hello, everybody. And we're coming on a little earlier because we're super excited, or I'm super exited to introduce earlier because we're super excited, or I'm super excited to introduce earlier because we're super excited, or I'm super excited to introduce. Whoa, what's happened to the sound? Chris, can you still hear me?
I can hear you. I think the echo is gone.
But I can't hear you now. So if I turn my volume up, I'm nervous of doing that. I'm just not sure if we've got that terrible feedback.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Okay. Right. Let's just get the feedback from everybody. Let's see. Have I got the Pleiadians on the line with us? Oh, we're clear. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We are a little early. No, I'm getting, am I getting echo again, or am I clear?
I don't hear it.
You don't hear it?
I heard it before.
Okay. Right. Okay. People are saying already, Christopher, you're great. There you go. So, welcome everybody. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. Your work is absolutely fascinating. And I wonder if we could just maybe start with, if you could tell us a little bit about your story, what changed for you, what awoke you, how you feel at this time, and why this is such an important time in our evolution.
Thank you. And it's very nice to be here. It's very nice to be interactive with you and your audience. And I appreciate it so much. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
For myself, most of my life, I have been, I'll call it asleep, going through life normally, started a business, being totally wrapped up with that. And then around the year 2012 is when things started to get a little weird for me. And then that reached a crescendo probably around 2016 to 2017. I started being affected by these things called Mandela Effects, which I'll explain a little bit as we continue the conversation. I also had experiences where I would start to see visions of things that I could not even describe, like the most interesting things. And I would describe them as 10-second movie clips in HD color. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could just see the different scenes, and it was really amazing. So I was like, what is going on? Like, what? I feel completely normal. And I would talk to my friends and I would ask them, like, do you ever close your eyes and see different visions? And they would be like, you need to be medicated. And then finally one friend said, oh, looks like you're getting access to your Akashic records. And I didn't have any idea what that was. I was like, Akashic records, what are you talking about? And then that began another journey. So I got hit with Mandela Effects on one side, and then the Akashic records on the other. And just things kept progressing until then. And now here I am talking to you. So yeah, so I'm very excited about the things I have to share. And as you know, I make all these videos about all these interesting things about reality and consciousness and Mandela Effects and Akashic records and so forth. So yes, that's pretty much it in the 10,000-foot view.
Well, that was a short synopsis, but thank you very much. Now let's go possibly a little deeper, please. Because the first thing I found out about you was that you talked about collapsing timelines and Mandela effects. So could you perhaps go a little more into that and what that means?
Yeah, so first of all, I find it easier and easier to talk to people about timelines, mostly because there's so much soft disclosure. So when you go to the movies and you're watching, whether it's a Marvel movie, they're talking about timelines. There's another movie that came out called Everything Everywhere All at Once, where it talks about all these different timelines and those timelines merging. There's basically a woman that owned a Chinese laundromat in this timeline, but in another timeline, she was a famous martial artist movie star. In another timeline, she was a chef. And like the timelines kept going and going and going, and she was able to go through that discovery process of who she actually was. And that's what I feel. I feel that we are probably less than 1% of what we think we are. There's just so much more that's going on. So, and then when it comes to Mandela effects, to me, that's the awakening. Like it shows almost like glitches in the matrix, or I call it like Easter eggs in a video game. They're hints and wonderful surprises that we have experienced a timeline shift. So when we observe these Mandela effects, it begins to cement in what reality actually is. And I'll use the term, I say this a lot in my videos, I say, can't be, but somehow is, which is a definition of a paradox. But yeah, so these Mandela effects are there to help us awaken to what reality actually is. And then there's hidden meanings of the Mandela effects. A lot of people, when they hear about them, they're like, oh, Mandela effect. Oh. But it's like, sometimes there's meanings to them, and interpreting what the meanings are can help us understand reality even more. So.
Wow. So, for example, I mean, the Monopoly man.
Yeah.
I remember the monocle. I always remember him having a magnifying glass.
Exactly.
And apparently now he doesn't. Is that right? Or have I got that wrong?
You've got that right. He's never, well, you've got it right and wrong. But yeah, it depends what timeline you're in. But basically, yeah, in this timeline, since the 1930s, whenever the Monopoly game came out, he's never had a monocle. But if you go to Amazon and buy a Monopoly Man costume, guess what it comes with? A monocle. And sometimes there are like parodies in movie comedies where they show like someone that's supposed to be the Monopoly Man, and they always have a monocle. So, you know, how could that be? It's because people remember that. Or the other famous one is Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, right?
Yes.
Most people remember that from Snow White.
Snow White, yes.
That was never spoken. Instead, what the witch says when she looks in the mirror is magic mirror on the wall. And that was in the original film. And you'll still see mirror, mirror because people remember in their memory, they still remember it. So if they create something new, they might say mirror, mirror on the wall, but that's not the way it is in this timeline. It was always magic mirror on the wall. So those are a couple. The Monopoly Man, mirror, mirror on the wall. In my business, like that's the other thing that got me to my customers, because I'll give you a little bit more background about myself.
Please.
I own a software company that specializes in food distribution. So basically it's getting food from these food warehouses to the restaurants, grocery stores, etc. And some of my clients would say, oh, you've got a bug in your software because it keeps on changing like the spelling of my avocados. And I would be like, what are you talking about? Well, do you know about there's a certain type of avocado that starts with an H. Do you know what they're called?
Yes, the Haas.
Yes. Do you remember how to spell that?
Well, the way I would spell it is Haas.
Exactly. See, we're from the same hood. We're from the same timeline, so to speak. But now in this timeline, it's always been Hass, Hass, discovered by Rudolf Hass in the 1930s, I think in California. So my customers would say, your software changed all of our Hass avocados to Hass. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like our software wouldn't do anything like that. And then it would lead to other product changes. So another example is here in the United States, there's a famous brand of stuffing mix called Stouffer Stovetop Stuffing. It's never existed. It was originally General Foods, and then it became Kraft in 1990. But everyone remembers Stouffer Stovetop Stuffing that never existed. So my customers would say, what happened to the Stouffer Stovetop Stuffing? It got removed from my inventory. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so to me, all these things started to add up. I started to discover what Mandela effects were. And then I found that it affects everything. It affects not just like movie lines or not just brands, but it affects geography of the earth. It affects art. It affects the spellings of people's names. It affects, well, something that's called dead and alive again, where a lot of people remember famous people dying, but they never died at that point. They actually went on to live on, like Mandela, like Nelson Mandela, that this was named after. So it affects all these different areas of life. And then not just that, it's the personal ones that get you too. Sometimes there'll be personal Mandela effects. So there might be a house in your neighborhood all of a sudden that becomes a different color. And you might be, oh my God, they painted that overnight? How do they do that so quickly? But no, that's an example of a personal Mandela effect. And that sometimes is more shocking to people than the big ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Somebody just asked in the chat, actually, Chris, if somebody's been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, could they be jumping timelines?
Yeah, timelines, jumping realities, absolutely. Schizophrenia, that type of thing is basically uncontrolled moving between timelines and realities. So yeah, that's a good point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this Mandela effect, as you say, it affects everything. So what does that mean on a deeper level from your viewpoint? How can we use that constructively? Yes, it surprises us, but what does that mean in terms of our awakening?
Yeah, so the big thing is first of all, does it even have a basis in science, right? So if you ask science, like what are Mandela effects, they'll tell you you're just misremembering, you're just confabulating. And they can prove it. Like they can prove to people that Haas avocados were never HAAS. It could be proved it was always HASS. So that could be something that they could go back and say, you're wrong, you're misremembering something. But on another level, on a higher level, quantum physics, holographic reality, holographic universe, those type of concepts start to give us clues as to what is going on. So if we are in a holographic existence, if let's say Earth is basically a holographic, existence that we're in right now, what does that mean? So what's a hologram? A hologram is a projection of light. So projection of light, but what is light? Light is literally photons. What are photons? Photons are literally sound waves in the ether. And some people may have heard of something called cymatics, which is where if you put like sand or water on a vibration plate and it vibrates at a certain frequency, it makes these beautiful, amazing patterns. So that's an example of helping to explain what our reality is about. And there's something called acoustical levitation, where they can do the same thing, but the sand will levitate off the plate and make different shapes and so forth. So there's a lot of different things that science, when you look at it from that point of view, adds to the equation of what we are. And then what we are basically is we're progressing. We're living in probably one of the most interesting, important times, the way I see it, in human history, because we are going through this mass awakening. So whether it's like Mandela effects, all the craziness in the world that's around us, whatever it is, people are beginning to awaken to what reality is. And then once you can awaken to what reality is, it makes all these other things start to make sense. And then you can begin to understand how to navigate your life rather than kind of be pushed down the stream in the boat without any control. Now you're able to actually understand more about what's going on around us so that we can understand what timelines are, find the better timeline. Well, there's a concept called the golden timeline, the age of truth versus the age of chaos. Basically, two of these timeline branches splitting off. One's called the graduation timeline, where we reach the next level, which is the one that we're on right now. But all these things that are happening in the world right now, they really have to happen to help awaken people. Because one way or another, people are going to wake up. That's the way I see it.
Wow. So how do we get to this golden timeline, Chris?
Well, the thing is, I believe we're already on it. And I believe that there's a lot of signs that we're on it. And as interesting as this may be, one of the signs has to do with something called mandanimals. And a mandanimal is a Mandela effect animal, which means it's an animal on the timeline that people have never seen before. And I've done a lot of shows with people before where we talk about all these new interesting animals that we've never heard of. Like, for example, in Australia, no, I don't live in Australia, but if you live in Australia, you know this already, but there's something called tree kangaroos. There's kangaroos that live in trees. And they're adorable, they're cute. I don't know why no one's ever had a cartoon or animation or teddy bear or something. So there's all these interesting animals on the timeline that for a lot of people that were never there before. but there's a lot of golden animals, animals that have a very unique golden color. We call them golden mandanimals. And to me, it's like one of the many signs that we're on the right timeline. And then there's rainbow signs too. For a lot of people, there's the Rainbow Mountains that appeared in China, and then the Rainbow Mountains that appeared in Peru, and then these things called rainbow trees, which are fascinating. And then there's a rainbow geyser, prismatic geyser in Yellowstone Park, and there's a yellow river, I think it's in Peru or someplace in South America. So all these different rainbow animals. There's a rainbow squirrel, the rainbow squirrel of India. So all these interesting animals that are either rainbow colored or golden colored that are appearing on the timeline are more clues that we're on the right timeline. Despite that, so we're on the right timeline, but that chaos timeline keeps trying to grab us down, pull us down, but we're like, no, we're staying up here. So yeah, so there's all these different signs. When you read into it, there's all these different signs. Even reading into something like the Mandela Effect of mirror, mirror on the wall, right? So now it's magic mirror on the wall. So the way I read into that, in a good way, is that could we now be in a timeline where there's more magic in a good way, like positive magic? So is that a sign? And then there's other signs too when it comes to teeth, for example.
Yes, please talk about teeth.
Okay, I'll talk about teeth. So for a lot of people that go to the movies, there's an older movie, this James Bond movie called Moonraker. And in that movie, there was the villain. His name was Jaws. And he had horrible teeth and all this metal. And his thing was he could bite through anything, kind of a thing. He falls in love with this lady named Dolly. And in the movie, the way myself and so many people remember it, Dolly is very cute. She's attractive. She's got blonde hair, ponytails. And she had these braces. And the whole thing was that they wound up falling in love because they both had these braces. However, in this timeline in the movie, she doesn't have braces. She has perfect teeth. Her teeth are perfect. They're beautiful. They're white. They're shiny. So a lot of people, they see that as a Mandela effect, and then they stop there. They're like, that's a Mandela effect. This is weird. And then I'm like, okay, that's true. It's a Mandela effect for a lot of people. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people. And it is weird. But can you read into that? Is there more to it than just the braces going away? And then when you start investigating what teeth are, it becomes fascinating, because teeth, the way I can see it from the Akashic records, teeth are actually time crystals. So every time you eat something or liquid passes over your teeth are actually recording that. So your teeth are really good with time. And that's why they say that people that do time travel wind up having all these teeth problems, because of time travel. So what if teeth are time crystals? What does it mean if all of a sudden on her teeth, she doesn't need her braces anymore? Could it be a sign that we're in a better timeline? Like the timelines have improved. It's almost like this. There's another Mandela effect of the Mona Lisa smiling more. So, could that be another sign that we're like the Mona Lisa is now smiling at us, like she never smiled at us before? So, but yeah, the whole thing about teeth. So when you dive deeper into it, you begin to see more layers, and like as if there are those in the unseen that are trying to communicate these things to us, if we could only understand them.
Yes. Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you're a Capricorn, and Capricorn rules time astrologically, and time travel, and it rules the teeth and the bones and the structure of the body.
Interesting.
So when you talk about the recording, I think that's, wow, recorded in the teeth. And that's often the artifacts that they find when they do archaeological discoveries. They find the teeth, don't they?
That's true. That's true.
So going backwards in time. So how to get this going? People often say they see repeating numbers.
Yes.
Could you talk on that? They see ones or nines or fours. Could you perhaps?
Yeah, there's two levels to that, the way I see it. So I call it impulse control. So what that basically means is when you're seeing like 1111 or 444 or whatever the numbers are in a repeating pattern, that's impulse control. And what I mean by impulse control is that your higher self has now been able to get you to glance at a clock at a specific time. So when something like that happens, your higher self is like, woohoo, we did it. We got our avatar to, like, we're communicating with them, and they glance at the clock at a certain time. That's one part of it. The other part of it is it becomes a timestamp, because when you're looking at a clock at a certain time, whether it's 11:11 or 12:12, whatever it is, it's also producing a type of timestamp. So it's helping cement where you are in the timelines so that your higher self can help you continue to navigate on the right path. So I see it as two things. The higher self is taking control. It's actually a really wonderful thing, you know, angel numbers and however you want to describe it, it's all good. And then you're also time stamping where you are in the timeline so that your higher self can help you navigate to the highest potential timeline for yourself.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
wow.
I know. You never thought of that, right?
No.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's
you know, it's an expansion of our consciousness, isn't it, Chris? I mean, that's the next step. We have to expand consciousness. I mean, I think if we use 0.5% of what we got, I'd be surprised.
Exactly. And in some of my videos, I talk about Topsy the elephant. And some people are like, Chris, why do you talk about Topsy the elephant? You know what? But to me, it's like it's a perfect exercise in consciousness expansion. Now, I don't know if you know the story about Topsy. If you
no.
Once you know this, you'll never be the same. So prepare yourself. So if other people here watch my videos, they already know about Topsy. But basically, there was a certain point where I kept on getting messages from this elephant named Topsy, and I'm like, what? Who is Topsy? Like, and I'll get these weird messages, and I'm like, what is this? So I did some research on it, and in 1903, Topsy was an elephant that was killed. She was a circus elephant. She had the rough life of a circus elephant. Somebody put his lit cigarette on her trunk, which is the most sensitive part of an elephant. She wound up sitting on the man, and the man wound up dying. So they called her, you know, they basically said that this elephant had to die. So they decided to electrocute the elephant to death. Now, I know this doesn't sound right, but it hasn't really happened. Has a different ending than you're going to think it has. So, and by the way, Thomas Edison, his film company actually filmed the whole situation where she was tied to railroad tracks. What happened was when she died, and this was I call these chess moves. It was a chess move that Topsy had. Her higher consciousness, her higher self, had her do this chess move because when she died, her consciousness entered the electrical grid. So in New York City, in Coney Island, where she was killed, there was a brand new New York City electrical grid that was just going online. So her consciousness goes into the electrical grid. And that really starts to explain what consciousness is. Like, what happens? Like, are we our body? Or are we more than our body? And the thing is, we're more than our body. Our body is what we see. Our body is I call it our avatar. And the way I see it, we're literally rendering ourselves in the hologram through our DNA, which allows us to make this projection of who we are in the hologram. So when Topsy passed, she went into the electrical power grid. Now you might say, why would she go into the electrical power grid? Well, guess what was happening in the future? In the future, for people that were murderers, etc., they were going into the electric chair. And these people, they were haunted. Let's say they had I'll call them ghosts. Let's say they had 100 negative ghosts all around them. Boom, they all go into the electrical power grid when they get electrocuted. So Topsy became actually a superhero. She entered the grid for our protection to help us out. And you can watch some of my videos. I'll go into more details about it. But basically, she actually went beyond the electric power grid. She went into she's now in the internet. She got into the satellite system, and she's doing all these things behind the scenes that are helping humanity that people don't know about. But once you start to like understand who she is and you find out more about her, your consciousness energy is actually charging her up and helping her do more and more and more. And she has some kind of a secret mission. I don't know what it is, but there's all these things that she's working on. And yeah, so when you first learn that story, you're like, that can't be, but somehow is. Like, could your consciousness actually go into electricity? Is that possible? And we have soft disclosure about it. There's, for example, a movie named Tron, where the characters go into a mainframe computer, and there's a whole other existence within the mainframe computer. So there's soft disclosure everywhere about possibilities of what could be. So yeah, that's just one more thing that makes this intricate fabric of what we call life and reality even more fascinating when you start like going down more and more levels to see what else is out there. Because there's so much more, right? We can't even see like 1% of the light spectrum that's around us. 99% of the light spectrum we can't see. So what's around us? What's going on?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an example of something where like once you understand those type of concepts and how consciousness works and so forth, you begin to see like, wow, that, you may not believe it at first, but if you spend time thinking about it and you open your heart, like, could that be? And then I'll have people that write to me, they'll send me messages like, I talked to Topsy too, and she had a message for me. And so, yeah, so Topsy's loving the whole experience. And she had a big heart healing and there's all this other positive things. Now, some of my videos talk about it, but it's all really, really good. All really positive, actually.
Wow. Yeah, we have to open up, go beyond, oh, this is weird, or oh, this is peculiar. Got to get beyond that. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, because I could have kept my videos like really like scientific and blah blah blah. Like, why talk about Topsy the elephant? Like, but like, no, if it's real, if it's part of reality, I'm going to talk about it. Especially if she's giving me messages. So there you go.
I think that's just wonderful. So, and as well, so you talked about geography changing.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little more about that? Maybe give us some examples, or because that's fascinating as well.
Yeah. So someone like myself that, I don't know, I always used to like to look at maps. So when I would notice a geography changes, it would be a big deal. Now, for a lot of people, the big one is about South America. So South America, most people remember it being like directly under North America in the Panama Canal running east to west, not north to south. So right now in this reality, the geography of the earth has changed. And now South America is more pushed out towards Africa. It's closer to Africa than a lot of people remember. I look at a map and it doesn't make any sense to me. And I remember going to, like, I took a trip to Rio de Janeiro for business in the early 2000s, and it was great because Rio was in the same exact time zone as New York. So it was perfect. I didn't have to like adjust my time at all. Now, depending on what time of year it is, it's 2 hours difference. And that was not the case at all, just because the geography of the earth actually changed. And if you look at Italy, for another example, Sicily was always like, it was like a long distance boat ride to get from Sicily to Italy. Now they're almost connected. Take a look at the map, and Sicily is almost attached to Italy right now. And even the whole shape of the boot of Italy at the bottom, it just doesn't look the same. It's just like weird. And then you've got the islands of Sardinia and Corsica, which used to be like tiny little islands. Now they're huge. They're huge. So yeah, so when you look at maps and you look at these different things, what's happening? Like, how could that be? Like, are we literally on another Earth than we were on before? So yeah, so those Mandela effects, they get everything to help you understand that everything can change, including the Bible. That's another thing too. A lot of people that were like big Bible readers noticed changes in the Bible. And they're like, how could that be? How could the Bible change? That's the word of God. That has to be solid and fixed. But then when those things happen, it could be devastating for people. Because I know of, give you an example of a Bible Mandela effect, is in the book of Isaiah. And I'll ask you the question too, if you know this, but it always said, they're talking about animals, the blank will lie down with the lamb. It was from the book of Isaiah. I don't know if you've ever heard that passage before.
I'm not brilliant, but I thought it was the lion.
Yes, the lion.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, again, we're from the same hood. We're from the same timeline. So yeah, so that's what it is. It was always the lion will lie down with the lamb. Now, if you look it up, it says the wolf will reside with the lamb. So yeah, and I have a friend that, when he first saw that Bible passage, because I was raised in a very religious household, he said, Chris, I just went into my room and I cried and I prayed for 2 days because I couldn't understand like what was happening. And then it's funny because I brought that information to my father, and I told my father, like, I got this really good Mandela effect for you. You're gonna like this one. So I had him take out a Bible, and with the book of Isaiah, and he read it, and he's like, the wolf. He's like, I know what this is. This is just one translation. So he goes into his bedroom where he had like 5 or 6 other translations. He pulls them all out. Every one of them says wolf. And he's like, what is going on? And my mother's like, what is going on? They're totally confused. And I'm like, this is a classic example of a Mandela effect. So, and a lot of times people will try to rationalize them, like him. And it makes sense because that's the same thing that I did at the beginning. You try to rationalize it. So an example was, for me, the first one that really hit me, that I didn't even know about it, the famous one, the Berenstain Bear books. So a lot of people remember the Berenstain Bears, Stein. Now it's always been Stain. So when that one hit me, I didn't know what was going on. I would read that to the time my son was 3 years old. I would read those books to him, and I had like 20 of them. And I literally thought somebody broke into my house and stole all of my good Berenstain Bears books and replaced them with Stain books. And I'm like, why would someone do that? But in my mind, I couldn't come up with any other explanation. That was the only thing that I could think of. Because I actually pulled every book off the shelf, Berenstain, Berenstain, and I would read them every night. I saw them, I knew it was always Berenstain. So that's like another classic example. But at the time, I didn't know what it was. So you try to rationalize it away.
Yes,
that's the only way your brain can process it.
Wow. And I believe there's similar things going on with the human body. The heart was always on the left, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. And you say the Pledge of Allegiance in the United States here, you put your hand over your heart, it was always to the left. Yes. So what happened with the heart? And to me, these changes, they're upgrades. Because before, you could only take your blood pressure on your left arm. Now you can take your blood pressure on either arm, because now your blood is pumping evenly throughout your body. It's not skewed to the left like it was before. Same thing with your kidneys. A lot of people remember, like, if you get a kidney punch, for example, that means somebody like punched you in the lower back. And in boxing, that was illegal and so forth. But now your kidneys are more up in your rib cage, beside your lungs, so they're more protected. So yeah, and if you try to, like, even now, if you try to research what a kidney punch is, like on the internet, you get really weird results. Like, it's not at all anything about punching the kidneys. It's really interesting. So yeah, how all that stuff works. Yeah.
It's just fascinating. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Somebody goes on and on.
It goes on and on. So somebody's saying here, Doreena's saying you have a hard time understanding the Mandela effect. Well, of course, it beggars your belief, doesn't it? Because you had one reality, and then all of a sudden it's not what you remembered it to be.
Exactly. And then it's what's causing the Mandela effect. That's the other part of it too. Like, yes. What's behind it besides waking us up, which is like the end result. Like, what are the causes to it? So for myself, I have a few possibilities of what I feel are causing it. One is the concept of, well, there's time travel. There's what I call timeline insertions. And there's something, just a natural collapsing and merging of timelines are also causing Mandela effects. And so those are at least 3 things that are causing them. So, and each one of them is fascinating in itself. So if you take, like, how could time travel be causing a Mandela effect? Or what's a timeline insertion?
What is that? Yes, please. Okay. Make them dummies. I'm a dummy, that's for sure, in this subject. So if you can make it accessible, that would be wonderful, please.
Yes, so the concept of a timeline insertion. Okay, so I'm going to say some things that are going to maybe sound a little out there, but I'm just going to say them, and people can just, whatever, keep whatever resonates and throw away what doesn't. But sure. I'll liken this reality to being in a massive multiplayer video game type of a concept. So you're in this kind of a concept of, let's say, your consciousness in a supercomputer, having an experience. You're what you really are is your consciousness inside of this human avatar body. Now, there are those that know how to manipulate the natural order of things, and they can take an event and insert it into your timeline and make it so that becomes part of the historical record to serve some kind of a purpose, which I call a chess move. And there's different factions that are causing different chess moves depending on the outcome they want to have. So these timeline insertions are things that like appear in history that were never there before, and all of a sudden they're there because someone, let's say a higher source that has more understanding of the way reality works, has taken that timeline and inserted it and putting it into the main branch of the timeline. And there's positive and there's negative. There's both. It goes both ways. There's negative timeline insertions and there's positive timeline insertions. It's almost like someone playing chess. They're going back, somebody makes a negative move, and another player's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm going to counter that with a positive move. So those type of things as well. So that's the concept of a timeline insertion. And then there's the concept of time travel.
Yes.
A lot of people are like, oh, time travel, that's not real. Well, I'm here to say that time travel, I think it doesn't go beyond too much imagination to know that time travel can't actually be real. Like, I definitely totally believe in time travel. And sometimes Mandela effects, when I read into them, I try to read into them, what are they? Is this a time travel? Is this, a timeline insertion? Is this something else called a hairball of timelines situation that happened? The Titanic was one of those. I can explain that later. So, but an example of a time travel Mandela effect is the Hindenburg.
So, tell us about that.
Yeah, so with the Hindenburg disaster in the 1930s. So I always remember, and maybe you do too, that it was really bad because there were no survivors. Like everyone died. Cameras were rolling. The Hindenburg goes up in flames, and it's like, oh, I don't want to ride in any of these blimps anymore. And so what's interesting about how you can connect the dots to see that time travel was involved is with something called St. Elmo's fire. So, and when it comes to time travel, St. Elmo's fire and plasma are like usually indications that time travel was involved. So what had happened was, on the day the Hindenburg went down, it was reports of there being like blue flames above the Hindenburg and blue lightning above the Hindenburg. And you could look in the historical record, and most people that have studied it have said that it was the rare instance of St. Elmo's fire. So where there's St. Elmo's fire, there's normally time travel. So now we have time travel possibly making a difference to the number of survivors, going from 0 to now there's 97 people on board, and now 62 survive. Most of the people now survive the Hindenburg disaster, as crazy as that sounds. So why would that faction want more people to survive? And why did the Hindenburg go down to begin with? Well, looking into it even more, Germany at that time was gaining great popularity because of air travel. People loved the airships like the Hindenburg, and the Hindenburg was flying between Germany and New York. It was going down to Brazil. It would take about 2.5 days to go between Germany and New York, and people loved the experience. It was like super quiet. You could just, almost like riding on a train. It was just like a beautiful experience, and people loved it. And it was gaining a lot of prominence for Germany. And the way it was looked at was that time travelers looking at all the different timelines, almost like Doctor Strange does in these Marvel movies, look at all the different timelines, and for whatever reason, the timeline where the Germans lost in World War II was always linked to the Hindenburg. because that changed the world's view of these airships and also Germany. So the Hindenburg disaster always had to happen because it changed the outcome of the war when you look at the timelines. But then some time travelers are like, well, let's go back and let's make it even better. The Hindenburg still had to go down, but let's make it have more survivors. So that's an example of a Mandela effect where you read into it more. You see there's time travel. Then you see why the timelines were picked, why the Hindenburg did have to go down. But then, the end result was that there's timelines now where there's more survivors. And even something like St. Elmo's fire, I think it's St. Erasmus was his name. He was looking over like ships. And the way that story goes is that if St. Elmo's fire hit the mast of your ship could travel through time. So let's say you were a pirate or you're some ship captain and you were doing something, you would have people in your crew that had DNA activations so that they could invoke St. Elmo's fire. And then you have other people of your crew that had activations to know where to move your X, Y, and Z coordinates within the hologram so you could quickly escape. So back in the day, St. Elmo's fire, plasma, hitting the mast of a ship, the ship could actually move through time. It could move coordinates, the X and Y coordinates, which is your location, and then the Z is your location in time. And I've heard backfire. Sometimes they would go way backwards in time, like 10,000 years in the past, and they weren't supposed to do that. So that's a whole other story there with St. Elmo's fire. But so much of time travel has to do with plasma and St. Elmo's fire and that kind of a concept.
Wow, it's fascinating. And I love it when you talk of plasma. Can you talk a little more about plasma?
Yeah, so what is plasma?
Yes.
Plasma is
very important.
Yeah, plasma, most people think of the sun when they think of plasma, but plasma is technically the fourth state of matter. Plasma is like very special. And fire is considered plasma. And one of the stories that I tell was that I was working with a friend of mine. His name is Sean Bond, and I do podcasts with him. And I was getting these messages about something wanting to trade with me for pumpkin technology. And I'm like, what is this? This is crazy, like Topsy the elephant, now pumpkin technology. Like, what are these crazy things? And Sean goes to me, like, you don't know what pumpkin technology is? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He's like, pumpkin technology is if you take a pumpkin and you create an opening inside of it and you put fire inside of it, like a jack-o'-lantern concept, it creates a link through time. And I'm like, what? Like, you could put fire in a pumpkin, and there are those that know they can jump from timeline to timeline based upon pumpkins. And then when you think about it, when you look at a pumpkin, you know what it's shaped like? A toroidal field, if you think about it. So isn't that something when the pumpkin seed grows and the pumpkin grows, it's actually a toroidal field. So you're putting plasma in a toroidal field. And then, I'll go a little bit more sideways with this. So a lot of people, when they think about pumpkins, they might think of Cinderella, right? So her fairy godmother turned a pumpkin into a carriage. So it's interesting that she chose a pumpkin to do this. So the pumpkin becomes a carriage, which has her travel to the ball. She travels through time, but she has to be back by a certain time, or else that carriage is going to turn back into a pumpkin again. So you've got traveling, you've got time being important, you've got pumpkins being toroidal fields, you put plasma in a pumpkin. And so like all these different things about reality, people are like, so when you start connecting the dots, and I love doing this, it's like a puzzle. It's like you're finding all these different puzzle pieces to try to figure out what reality is all about. But that's another example of plasma. I can keep going. I'll give you.
Please, keep going. They're fascinated. Yes.
I think the year is 1979. There's a city or town in France. I can't pronounce it right. Montelibra, whatever it's called. There's a civilian-based nuclear reactor there. In 1979, that reactor, for whatever reason, put out this huge plasma discharge. They didn't notify the public. It was civilian-based. It wasn't government. put out this big plasma discharge. People traveling down the roads were reporting time travel. All these weird time traveling things. They said all of a sudden they were back in time 100 years, then they went back to the current time. So there's that situation, which adds more to it. And then the military, like the US military, had a project called Project Pegasus, which some people may or may not have heard of. And that was all based upon plasma technology. So, and the way that would work was that someone named Sterling Colgate was the one that was in charge of that program. He was also one of the young guys that Oppenheimer had chosen for his atomic bomb experiments in the 1940s. But in any event, he created this thing called Project Pegasus, where it was this chamber you would go into that was about half the size of a tennis court, surrounded by lucite. It had like a composite plastic around it, and plasma. And you would go into the chamber, and there'd be a line. And once you'd walk over the line, you'd drop through this vortex and come out in another timeline, and usually in the past, sometimes in the future, depending on how it was programmed. And that was all based upon plasma. And then there's other concepts too, where some militaries have these like stealth bomber jets that create a plasma field around them. They're like, oh, radar can't, track them. They can go from point A to point B at super high speeds. We don't know how it does it. And they are actually airplanes, but they're actually flying time travel machines. Even it said that the Soviets have this torpedo that creates a plasma discharge around it that can go from point A to point B at super high speeds. Is it traveling through time, or is it something to do with the plasma that's having it change its X and Y coordinates at the very least? So there are all these things. The military has projects with pumpkins, St. Elmo's fire, all these things related to plasma, which are related to time travel, and how that dispersion of energy can actually have someone or something go change timelines and change where they are in the stream of time.
Wow. I mean, there's a big thing now. Various naturopaths and various natural practitioners are encouraging people to drink plasma water. That plasma water, rejuvenates the cells in the body.
Interesting. I've never heard of plasma water.
Okay. Yes. So that's why I'm fascinated. I think we're connecting various dots, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's probably a time traveler.
It can drive me nuts. No. Minimal, I'm live. Is it urgent?
Okay, I'm glad. That's the second and a very big, huge noise.
Yes.
And I stopped him.
Thank you for stopping him with the noise. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Please forgive me. We're live. We're on a different timeline. Sarah Popoli.
I thought I'm gonna get mad. Bye-bye. Okay,
Filakia Pola. Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
Time travel.
Plasma, Cinderella, all those different things.
It's fascinating. The Cinderella and the pumpkin. And then you've got pumpkins and Halloween and fire in the pumpkins.
Exactly.
And all that. Wow. And could you say a little more about the Titanic?
Oh yeah, so the Titanic is like super interesting. That whole situation. I actually created some of my original videos in my series called Symphony of Realities. I cover the Titanic, and the day that the Titanic went down was what I would call a hairball of timelines, because one of the clues that you have is that there are newspaper headlines where it's said that the Titanic did not sink. The Titanic hit an iceberg. It's been crippled, but it's being towed back into port. It was going into Newfoundland or something like that. Of course, we know that's not true. So a lot of people are like, well, that was just bad reporting. Like some reporter just made up a story that everything was okay. Could that be? Could there actually have been a timeline where the Titanic actually never did sink? And then why would the Titanic actually sink and go down? Like, what was the purpose of that? And a lot of people that have looked into the Titanic know of all the important people that were on that ship. There were a lot of wealthy people that were against the Federal Reserve, There was somebody on there, his name was John Astor. At the time, he was like the wealthiest man alive. He was going to be working with Tesla to do some kind of a free energy or an energy project. Tesla and Astor had known each other for a long time. They had a falling out, and then they decided they were going to like start collaborating again. So if the Titanic never went down, that would have created all of these like really positive timelines for us. But there were other factions involved that wanted to make sure that the Titanic went down. So there was all this conflicting information about it. And even now there's like all these conspiracy theories about the Titanic and this and that. And they all go to different timelines. A lot of them actually are accurate, but they're getting information that actually happened in another timeline, not necessarily the timeline that it went down on, that we're inside of right now. And you couple that with the sun, okay? The day the Titanic went down, there were all these big solar eruptions that were also causing disturbances in the geomagnetic field of Earth. And there, in one of my videos, I actually have the court transcripts of one of the people that was on the Titanic that lived, that was in charge of the navigation. And he said that the compasses were going crazy. Like they thought they were taking the far southern route, but they were actually on the far northern route. And he's like, according to the compasses, he said they were on the lower southern route. They weren't supposed to be going anywhere near those icebergs. So you take all of these different things. I call it a hairball of timelines. And then what happened is what we see manifested now. That's a timeline that won. So that faction actually won that one. And then there's other events that are other hairball of timeline events as well that are like become super interesting. One of them is the, for those who don't know, the Space Shuttle Challenger. There was a Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986, about a minute or so into launch. It exploded. It killed all the astronauts on board. But a lot of people have found that there's about 5 of those astronauts that still appear to be alive, which is crazy, right? So they've done this research. They take, you compare photographs of one to photograph of the other. Not only do they look the same, but older now, because, the years have passed, but they have the same names. Some of their birth dates are actually like slightly off, maybe a day or two off, but it's very, very close. What is going on? So a lot of people are like, oh, those are just doppelgangers. They just happen to have the same name and they just happen to look the same. Other people are like, oh no, NASA was just, not being honest with us. So the Challenger never actually exploded, and then they just put these people back into regular lives. But that doesn't hold weight either. What actually happened, well, from my reading, I'll say from my reading of the Akashic Records, what actually happened was 5 of those astronauts are what are considered founders or builders or dream weavers. They were very important to be on the timeline. Now they may have not known that consciously themselves, but their higher self did know that. These beings that are founders are like system administrators in a computer network or a video game, however you want to put it. They're really important to be on the timeline because they literally made the timeline a million times better by being on this graduation timeline. So what happened here? Because you can go back and like look at their past. So one was like the payload specialist, but now in this timeline, she is actually she lives near me. She's an attorney, she teaches law at Yale. And you can look back and see that she was always trained to be a lawyer. She went through law school in the 1970s. You can find all that. She had nothing to do with NASA, nothing to do with space, but she has the same name, same birth date, and looks identical to this one of the astronauts that was killed. How could this be? Well, the best way for me to answer that is from a movie. There's this movie that recently came out called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And what that movie is about this Chinese lady who owns a laundromat, but in other timelines, she discovers she's a famous martial artist, or she's a famous chef, or whatever it is. So what happened is, because these people had to be on this timeline, Earth brought in their that these people from other timelines and put them onto this timeline because they needed to be here. So, and that's the whole concept, like who we are now. Like we could be here. I'm me, and you're Brasha, and we're living our lives, and we've chosen different life paths. But we could have chosen other lives where, I don't know, I could be like a singer in another lifetime, or an athlete, or this, or whatever it was. But I made certain decisions to be who I am in this lifetime. So are there actually other timelines? So the way I explain it is that an Earth authorized it. They were brought in from other timelines, placed onto this timeline. That's why some of their names are a little bit different, and their birth dates are a little bit different, but they look the same, and their personalities actually may be completely different. So the multiverse, all these different concepts, is it real? Like, we have glimpses of what reality might be, but it's like, for a lot of people, it's like, that's just too magical. That's just like too much. Could that really be? Could we actually have other existences and other timelines and other realities? So that's another example of this concept, and the two different factions fighting. One didn't want the Challenger to explode, and one wanted it to explode. The end result was that the good faction won because they were brought in from other timelines because they needed to be here. But there was a hairball of timeline event that was happening at that time to try to change the way the course of history would work. In that case, I think we won. So
this is just, it's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sort of blown mind here, and there's a lot of people, as well, fascinated with everything you're saying. And so as we move forward now, or we think, we're moving into this time of awakening, who are we as a human race? What do we want to be? Where we're moving towards? We're moving now. Facebook is going to metaverse. How do you see that? What's your take on how we can use this in a positive, constructive way and become golden like the apples you talked about? Yeah.
I think that we need to have, keep our minds open, keep our hearts open. Our higher selves kind of know, they can kind of see the whole chessboard. They can kind of see everything that's going on. And they're like looking at angel numbers, or seeing repeating numbers. They're always trying to get our attention. They're always trying to do things to help us realize if we should move to another location, or change our job, or whatever it is to keep things on the up and up level. And I know for myself, I didn't really have any big breakthroughs until I had literally emotional breakdowns, like on the floor, crying, whatever the reason is. And just when those type of things would happen, it would just purge things out of me that would provide more space for my higher self to come in. And that's what I feel has been happening, little inch by inch, millimeter by millimeter. And a lot of people want things to happen really, really fast and so forth. It doesn't necessarily happen that way. So when you could begin to open yourself up, to have your higher self step in more. And if you're seeing angel numbers, you're already on the path. You're literally on the path already. It's already happening for you. So, and just let the synchronicities in life guide you, because nothing is coincidence. That's one of the things that I've been learning. Nothing is a coincidence. Everything is synchronistic, literally everything. If you're driving down the road and there's a weird license plate that has some weird series of numbers or letters, you might look at that and it might trigger something, or whatever it is, whatever it might possibly be. Sometimes videos might pop up in your YouTube feed, and you might, why did that one show up? And then you might click on it, and it might give you some information that you would have never searched for on your own. So stay open. And I know it sounds weird, but cry, in a good way. Just let it out of you. There's so much stuff we all have built up inside of us, especially myself over the years being asleep for most of my life. Just the darkness that would be there. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's better to have more light. It's better to have more space for light to come in.
Oh, that's beautiful, Chris. And you're right. Same happened for me 6-7 years ago. I was at the most darkest point in my life. Dark night of the soul. And that was when the channeling and the Pleiadian and so many things changed. So if anybody's going through that, take heart and let it rip you open in a way. Let it just open you. Because I love what, you've talked about magic mirror, pumpkins, possibilities, but this all has a very spiritual correlation. Yeah, on a higher level, it's taking us to this golden frequency, the golden age that we're moving towards. So.
Exactly. And a lot of us are starting to appreciate concepts like the law of one, like we're really all one, but we're all having an individual experience, but we're really all part of the same consciousness. We're existing in a sea of consciousness type of a thing. And we can create our reality. I believe we can, once we can clear some things out of our way to more clearly see things, like the double slit experiment that quantum physics talks to us about, where basically the observer changes the observed. So you can actually change things from the frequency you emit. And everything is frequency, like literally everything. Well, Tesla said everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's exactly what we are. And I also see us as software. And sometimes there could be programs running in us that we don't need, that we need to remove. And I know I've heard it said, and I agree with this, that one of the first programs that we get hit with that's not good for us is when we're born, we get the abandonment frequency added to us, because now we're not part of the big consciousness anymore. Like now we're all by ourselves. So, and there's all other kinds of things too. There's the lack frequency, the sacrifice frequency, the control frequency, all these like things that once we can figure out how to clear them, we can create abundance.
Wow. And then we begin to claim all the positive frequencies.
Yes.
The joy, the love, the abundance,
we attract
the perfect health, the partners, the relationships, all of it. Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. Chris, just mind-blowing being with you. You're a wonderful storyteller. You've got that Mercury in Sag, so we could listen to you for hours. Yeah, and I would just like to thank you so much, and maybe you would come back if, I think there's going to be quite a few questions and feedback, so maybe in a little while, if you consider that, would you consider that?
I would, and we talked about this briefly before the show, but I was going to ask you about an astrology Mandela effect, because I'm a Capricorn, right? I was born December 28th, and I always remember the symbol for Capricorn being a goat.
Yes.
But that's not the way it is right now, right?
Exactly. It always used to be the goat, and you used to see its 4 legs in the little icon. You saw the feet, right?
Yes.
You did.
Yes.
Become the sea goat. And you're dead right. How? And it's in all the books now. Every astrology book you go to. I'm like, really?
So that makes me think, is Capricorn an earth sign or a water sign or a mixture of both? I don't know. I don't know what it means.
I mean, now, of course, astrologers extrapolate a lot about the sea goat, the water, the earth. I mean, there's a lot there, but exactly, you've picked up a Mandela effect in astrology. So it's,
see, it literally affects everything. And what I could also see is that from the Akashic records, when it comes to like humanity, about 10% of us are born with the ability to see Mandela effects, to actually see them and understand them, and like it stops us in our tracks. And then there's another 40% of us that have that within our DNA, that it may not be turned on yet. But when you listen to other people like myself and others tell their Mandela effect stories, then it activates your DNA. And then all of a sudden, like a lot of people that have watched this show, they may start to see Mandela effects everywhere. Some people didn't know anything about the Mandela effect, or maybe just a little bit, are going to start seeing it everywhere. And it's a DNA activation, and it's something that's actually very powerful. And don't be frightened by it. They're all good. That's the whole thing. And there's always beautiful things that could be read into it one way or another. That's the way I see it.
Oh, I love that, Chris. And you're right. Just going into the bathroom and seeing that the switch, I think I heard you mention this in one of your videos, the light switch had changed wall, or, you know, just things like that. Just don't be surprised if you start to see things that you've not noticed before.
Yeah, and I'll give you like a personal example from myself.
Please.
In the house that I live in, you know, it was like a custom built house, and my shower is custom built. It's not a regular form shower. I go in my shower one day, and where the shower head is, it's moved 3 inches over to the left. So now I got to stand like against the wall. I'm like, this was never like that before. But it's those type of things. So like, because it's a custom built house, like the plumber at that time might have made a decision, and now it doesn't even, there's a drain at the bottom. It used to line up with the drain. Now it doesn't even line up with the drain. It's like 3 inches over. So those are the type of things that start to happen. And as you become aware of it, some people will be like, oh, I must have just forgot about that. Or I must have just remembered that wrong. Like, no, have faith in yourself. Like, yeah, it was always mirror, mirror on the wall. Don't let someone try to tell you it was magic mirror. You know, it was actually always mirror, mirror to you.
Yes. And the lion and the lamb.
And the lion and the lamb.
Yeah. So start looking for these things now, and you'll be amazed what may come up in your life. So let's build more. Let's tune in more to the Akashic records. Thank you so much, Chris. You are an amazing. You tell things in such a really inspiring way. So thank you. I think you've fired everybody up today.
Cool.
And really thank you, and hope to have you back, please.
Yes, you're very welcome. And if there's any subjects you want to talk about in more detail, if anyone watching this now wants me to go into a certain subject, that's great. And we could focus on that. So.
Fantastic. And we can do that. So do check out Chris's website. It's quantumbusinessman.com. Is that right?
It is, and it's a very basic website. I'm going to be adding more to it. I have a channel on YouTube called Quantum Businessman. It's Quantum Space Businessman. You could find all of my videos there. I'm going to be actually posting another video later today. So yeah, that's how you can find me and discover more about me.
That's great. And also, if you're interested, this is to get you thinking. Chris works with light language. He's working on 2 projects right now, incorporating light language for DNA and other activations. So activating abundance, activating Mandela effects to find love and friends in your life, soulmates. So there's a lot that you're working with. And so if there's interest there, send your questions in, and we'll do a Q&A or something like that, Chris.
Yeah, actually, one of my last videos, I did a light language activation to help people find their soul family. So, and I find that really interesting too. So I did a light language activation. I spoke light language, and I was interpreting what I was saying. And then once you listen to it, and if you agree to it, you just snap your fingers and you agree to that, and you repeat some of the words that I say. And then I'm like, give it some time and see who comes into your life. It's not going to be immediate, because you actually start emitting a homing beacon that only your soul family can see. And now the other higher selves of the other parts of your soul family, now they can find you, and now they have to start chess moving things. Because maybe there's someone in Japan, like you're in Greece, but there's somebody special in Japan. Now your higher selves have to figure out how to start chess moving events so you can actually meet each other. So yeah, so light language is that's another fascinating thing. And light codes come down, provides DNA activations, and it's another beautiful way of like advancing in the Earth game.
Wow, I love this. Chris, you've whetted more appetites here. People have already subscribed to your channel, so really exciting. Thank you very, very much. It's been a delight, a joy, and we hope to see you soon. Do check Chris out.
Thank you.
Thank you.